Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if the fourth great Shinobi War went completely off script, and changed the Shinobi world forever? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto growls in annoyance, his breath is a bit haggard as Sakura applies healing chakra to his arm, which is severely burned, and Kurama was doing his best to keep him alive from exhaustion. Kuso. Her defenses are even better than Gaara's. I'm also pretty low on chakra. Sasuke, we need to end this quickly. You distract her and I will touch her with my seal, you touch her with yours after, okay? Naruto whispered, occasionally glancing at Kagaya as she stood stoically there, waiting for Naruto and Sasuke's next move. Sasuke hated to admit it, but he was also on his last legs too. Keeping aloft with his Susanoo was hard, but it was better than falling into the lava of this dimension. Alright, let's go, Sasuke said as he started flying to the side, but slowly getting closer to Kagaya, drawing her attention from Naruto to him, but he silently cursed to himself as he realized this may be a moot plan, given her apparent Byakugan. Naruto had adopted the jutsu Madara had used after Kurama had broken it down to him after seeing it for a few times. It was a non-elemental based jutsu, but it required a lot of chakra as trade-off. Limbo. Naruto thought to himself, and at first he thought it had failed, but soon noticed his chakra reserves were dangerously low. Kurama had only been able to create enough for this jutsu and keep him alive. Along with 5 invisible Narutos rushed out towards Kagaya. I guess this will have to do for now, hopefully Sasuke's distraction is enough. He thought to himself, as Kagaya had her all-seeing Sharingan out. Kagaya was completely focused on Sasuke's assault at the moment, banking on being able to feel the killer intent from Naruto to block his attack, but if it was anyone else the killing intent that Sasuke was emitting would be fatal. Nice try, but your little pin-prick attacks will do nothing to me, she said indifferently, as she quickly diffused that fireballs into nothing but fire nature chakra that left a warm breeze as it passed her. What she didn't notice was that the chakra that had flew past her had masked Naruto's Limbo's currently minimal chakra right now. So it wrapped her in a full Nelson headlock, holding tight as Kagaya flailed pointlessly. Sasuke let out a sigh of relief as he downed another soldier pill, bringing back a little of his vast cage-level chakra reserves. He had truthfully used more chakra than was safe distracting her, but the curse mark had kept him alive. Naruto let out a sigh of relief as he lurched forward, floating as the Rakudo Sennin he was allowed, hand outstretched. Sasuke now, he exclaimed, a sun forming on the palm of his hand, the moon forming on Sasuke's hand as he flew towards Kagaya, dropping his Susanoo. Switching with one of Naruto's black orbs. We did it. The dimension started to fade back to the intense godly battle-scarred land between Konohagakure no Sato and Takigakure no Sato. Though one thing was very much apparent to Naruto and Sasuke after a few moments. I wouldn't celebrate so quickly, as I am not sealed, though I must thank you for releasing me from that horrendous man's control. Is there any way I can fix this blasphemous appearance? She asked curiously, as she was currently in an Edo Tensei form, which she found blasphemous as a shrine priestess. Naruto's sweat dropped, though he was grateful that the battle had seemingly stopped, because he knew if he had to continue things as they are, there would be a high chance the only hopes to their survival was zero. Yeah, I remember a jutsu used by an enemy turned friend at one point used. He called it the Rinne Tensei. Naruto admitted, though he honestly did not know why he was helping the enemy, but something deep in his soul told him that Kagaya didn't mean them any more ill will, or she was damn perfect at acting and hiding auras. Sasuke sent Naruto a "shut up or I kill you Dobi" look, but something told him that they were no longer in danger as well. Naruto, I'd be careful about telling her about such deadly techniques. He trailed warily. Kagaya looked a bit annoyed that he didn't believe that she wasn't going to attack them anymore, but she couldn't fault them for being precautious of her. given all the havoc she had wrought since she was brought back from the dead. Why thank you, Ito, I do not know your name. She trailed lightly, as she only knew him by the name she herself had given him, the Child of Prophecy. Naruto gained one of his foxish grins on his and he dropped his golden Kurama cloak much to Sasuke's annoyance. Though after a few moments of Naruto still not being attacked, Sasuke dropped his perfect Susanoo as well. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. After this I will be the cage of Konohagakure no Sato. He exclaimed lightly, giving her the Maida Guy-approved thumbs up of youth. Somewhere else on the battlefield. Lee. Somewhere I can feel someone's flames of youth burning brightly. He exclaimed as he pulled his teeth from Karen's arm. Much to Guy's dismay and arguments about how leaving bite marks was unyouthful and all that, he had taken Karen's help. It was slowly regenerating his skin, but at the level he had broken his legs, it would kill Karen to try and regenerate, meaning he would never walk again without aid. Back with the trio, Kagaya smiled at this, then her eyes widened a bit as a blush crossed her face. Naruto's torso had been exposed because his shirt was little more than tatters at the moment. My, he would make a wonderful mate. I haven't felt the touch of a man in a few millennia. She is still a human woman after all, she thought to herself as she admired Naruto's body as discreetly as possible, but this didn't go unnoticed by the wandering nin that was Sasuke. Sasuke noticed her eyeing Naruto, but the blush on her face threw him off. He, unlike his counterpart, was painfully aware of things of the opposite gender. He had spurned many beautiful women's advances as to not get them involved into his descent into bloodlust or domination plans. Contrary to popular belief, he had a heart, so he slowly slid his katana back into the scabbard as the lightning nature chakra disappeared as well. Kagaya thought for a moment and realized she could use the aforementioned technique as well. The Rinnegan part of her Sharingan pulsed, and the statue Nagato had used to revive the Leaf Village appeared beside her. I shall return momentarily, she said, stepping into the statue's mouth, disappearing as the mouth closed. Naruto looked to Sasuke, who also shared his confused look as to why she was no longer attacking them, but both were thankful that the fighting seemed to be over as the jaw slowly lowered, revealing a still white-haired woman, but now it was slightly darker, more silver than pure white. Her eyes still a pale lavender as seen on the Hyuga, and she was now wearing a red-bottomed, white-topped shrine priestess outfit. Think Kikyo from Inuyasha. Sasuke's eyes narrowed at her, drawing his katana swiftly, charging lightning chakra into it, gaining a defensive stance. Kagaya noticed Sasuke's returned animosity towards her, but waved it off, as she cleared her throat, garnering their full attention to her. First off, I am guessing you guys are wondering why I am not wiping the floor with your weakened forms, correct? Kagaya said, intentionally making a jab at the Uchiha's pride. When he looked annoyed at her, she laughed lightly, and waved him off. When you're a goddess incarnate, you can even wave off the annoyance of an angry Uchiha. Kagaya loved this part about it. Naruto laughed at Sasuke's annoyance too, because at least he could admit there was almost no chance in hell of them winning against her, but he still had Kurama, and all the other tails creating as much chakra as they could just in case. More importantly, how did only Madara's influence on you as an Edo Tensei get sealed, but not you yourself? Naruto asked curiously. When it came to women, he was a complete dunce, but otherwise, he was on the battle tactics and analyzation of Inara. Kagaya returned her sight back towards Naruto, and smiled, weirding Naruto out a bit. He is very perceptive, he will make a great mate. Kagaya thought to herself and nodded at Naruto's question. That is easy to tell, it's because it was created by the shrine priestess. Used to seal demons that used to roam the countryside before the time of ninjas. I cannot directly stop it but I can redirect it, though I couldn't in the Edo form under Madara's control, so there is only one person that could have done that. She trailed lightly, and looked to her right as an ethereal form of Hagoromo Otsuki appeared next to her. Hagoromo nodded with a sly smile, as she says, it is true, my mother was unable to change the direction of the seal, but I did, the fact that you two are still alive proves my theory. Hagoromo said, looking towards his mother with a smile. After being sealed in the moon for so long, even her soul couldn't leave. It seems the insanity from her consuming the forbidden fruit eventually wore off. Hagoromo said, causing Naruto and Sasuke to sweat dropped at this. Hagoromo had risked their lives, and the lives of the world on a gamble. Even Tsunade is not much of a gambler compared to this enigma. Sasuke recovered first from his stupor, and straightened up a bit. You're telling me that your mother is now sane? Or as sane as she can be? Sasuke asked curiously, his hand never leaving his katana. He was physically exhausted, but his chakra had recovered to about a third of its normal levels. Naruto smacked Sasuke upside the back of his head at the last comment. Hey, that was rude, man. Be thankful that she didn't even want anything in return for us conspiring against. Naruto was about to finish when he was interrupted by Kagaya clearing her throat, garnering the attention of all the males present. I never said I didn't want anything. She trailed, blushing a little, looking at Naruto with a smile. To trade for the restoration and release of everyone present, I want you, Naruto, as my mate. She said, causing everyone, including her son, the famous Rakuto Sennin, to have their eyes widen at her demand. Hagoromo looked baffled at this. He had to admit, Naruto controlled his sage powers rather well, but the prospect of having someone so young as his father was a no-go with him. But mother, he is but a child, he exclaimed, causing Naruto grow a tick mark on his forehead. Limbo. 3 more Naruto shadows appeared, and pounced on the ethereal Hagoromo. The shadows had shifted to the same plane as Hagoromo. Take that back, I'm 19 now, he exclaimed in indignation before his shadows were pried off of her son by Kagaya. Sasuke was still shocked at this sudden revelation, but soon recovered. This Dobi is going to be married to a literal goddess amongst humans. It should be me, the all-powerful Uchiha, Sasuke exclaimed in annoyance. I had to insert some Sasuke bashing in somewhere. He is a thorn in my side in the series. Before Sasuke could even blink, Kagaya had seamlessly glided over to Sasuke, and cracked him over the head with a fist. It's my choice, and I don't want some stuck-up snob to be married to me for all eternity. Databake, she exclaimed, her hair standing up like a certain red-hot habanero we all know and love. The nearby area had filled with a dangerous amount of ki aimed at Sasuke, courtesy of Kagaya. Naruto bursted into laughter at this, diffusing the situation almost immediately. Sasuke sat rubbing his head now as Naruto recovered from his bout of laughter. You sound just like my Ka-san. I used to hate my verbal tick, but my mom made me love it. It's cute, and it seems you have a similar one. Naruto said as he wiped a tear from laughing so hard from his eye, and stood back up. Hagoromo had let himself snicker a little bit. It really was funny to see his mother get like this, and it wasn't aimed at him or his brother, seeing her suddenly break from her normally stoic expressions. It's good to see you back to normal, Mom. Oh well. It seems my time here is gone. Take care of my mom now, okay Dad? Hagoromo asked, leaving one last jab at the blonde-haired knucklehead ninja. Sakura had walked up as she had tended to all the people she could, and was currently recovering her chakra to tend to the next wave of injured. Did he just call Naruto father? She asked, causing all eyes to turn to her, causing Naruto to sigh, but nod in affirmation at her observation. Naruto had almost forgotten about her request to trade for his hand in marriage, for the lives of all the remaining ninja and their release from the Tsuki no Mai. Oh yeah, Kagaya-chan, I agree to your terms. Please release and bring back the fallen. Naruto intoned, his voice laced with conviction as to what he had to do to save his loved ones. One of his mottos was to protect those he cared about, and he cared about all of the alliance. Kagaya nodded at this, and her third eye pulsed once more. The statue that hadn't left her side now released all the recently deceased souls back into their bodies, regenerating them enough to live. Her third eye slowly began to close, as the moon's blood-red color began to fade. The pods along the trees started to open as tree slowly began retracting itself into the ground, causing the asleep ninja to lay safely on the ground. I see your conviction to your principles is as hard as steel, so you will make a fine Naruto-kun. She said with a soft smile, causing Naruto to blush. As the third eye fully closed, her horns also retracted into her forehead, making her look more human than anything else right now. Sakura's eyes widened at what Kagaya said, and the lines started connecting to what she overheard. What? You're marrying her? Didn't she try to kill you? Sakura exclaimed incredulously, causing the present party to cover their ears as at the sheer volume that this pink-haired woman could produce. Naruto nodded solemnly, but smiled soon after. It's alright, Sakura-chan, she reminds me a lot of my mom, and Hinata combined, so I am sure it will be fine. Naruto admitted, and explained what had happened while she was gone, causing Sakura to nod in acknowledgement as to what had went down. Sasuke saw the look in her eyes. She didn't want to see her friend go down this path, maybe out of slight jealousy. She hadn't been entirely lying when she told Naruto she loved him, just not the way he had wanted in the past. It's okay, Sakura, though there is a little something we have to settle before things are officially done. You recover faster than I do, so I know you're ready for this. Sasuke trailed, as he looked at the only man he had ever considered truly a friend. Naruto nodded as well, and they took to the air, flying towards what was left of the Shumatsu no Tani after their last encounter. Yeah, let's finish this. It's still 2-2 after all, Naruto exclaimed, gaining his foxish grin, giving Sasuke the Meta-guy-approved thumbs-up of youth as they flew towards the Shumatsu no Tani. Sasuke was the first to arrive, dropping his Susanoo. He wanted to fight Naruto, no avatars for now. Look what I still have, Sasuke said, reaching into his cloak, pulling out his old scratched forehead protector. He held up a hand to Naruto to ask him to wait a few moments. Sasuke charged lightning into a kunai, essentially electroplating the headband with his kunai, making it darker, the scratch and the leaf symbol disappearing. Once that was finished, he carved the Konohagakure symbol into it, and donned his headband once again, sending Naruto his own version of the foxish grin that Naruto loved and cherished so much. A wave of nostalgia passed over Naruto, as flashbacks of when they were kids popped into his head, though some things were vastly different. The hatred towards Naruto and his brother was no longer there. In its place was the slightly out of place, a look that Naruto hadn't truly seen in years. Happiness that he was going to spar with someone he considered a friend. Come on, I won't hold back just because you look like something Tora dragged in, Naruto exclaimed lightly, causing Sasuke to gain a tick mark at two things: Naruto's jab at him, and the mention of that demonic cat they had to capture so many times. Sasuke's hand went up to scar he still had along his jawline from the time he had captured Tora. After that, he let Naruto capture him. Because of the Kyuubi, he didn't scar up at all, much to Naruto's dismay. You look like you normally do after Tora gets her claws into you, Sasuke said with a smirk, causing Naruto to gain a tick mark on his forehead too. He had actually been hospitalized one time by that damned cat. Naruto clenched his fist for a second, then let it relax as he felt laughter bubbling up inside of him. Why did he feel this way? Because he was cracking jokes with a man who seemed to have gone to the darkest part of himself, and seemed impossible to recover, but now this was proven wrong. He snickered a little bit, barely able to contain his laughter. So did Sasuke. Soon they were both in a fit of laughter. Sasuke's laughter was natural, and didn't sound forced, nor did it sound like the time when he attempted to kill Sakura. Naruto was the first to recover, clutching his sides as they hurt from laughing so hard. I'm glad I am able to crack a joke or two with you like in the past, Naruto said with a genuine smile beaming at Sasuke. Sasuke nodded, a light, but genuine smile crossed his face. You ready to lose worse than Real Madrid did? Naruto gained a tick mark on his forehead at this quip. You ready to lose like Brazil did to Germany? He asked, causing Sasuke to chuckle at this. Naruto drew a kunai as Sasuke drew his katana, not coating it in lightning chakra, because this time he didn't want to kill Naruto, it was a spar for old time's sake. Sasuke then disappeared from sight, causing Naruto's eyes to widen, but soon realized where his rival was as the air behind him suddenly shifted. Naruto's other black orbs, that remained after Sasuke switched with one of them quickly shifted into defensive mode, blocking the kick that would have hit Naruto. Not immediate, seems this will be like the fight with Gaara back during the Chunin exams. Sasuke mused out loud and Naruto nodded. Naruto smirked as Sasuke let his guard down to quickly retreat from the reach of his black orbs, but failed to notice the one bolting for him. Gotcha! Naruto exclaimed as the ball went hurtling into what he thought was Sasuke, but had to cover his eyes as wood chips went flying at him. I haven't seen the Kawarimi no Jutsu since our academy days. Naruto said with a nostalgic look on his face, but it quickly disappeared as Sasuke appeared in front of him, causing Naruto to go on the defensive as they engaged in a taijutsu battle. Their weapons long since forgotten as they engaged in a deadly dance of power and skill. Sasuke kept pounding down on Naruto's defense, silently thanking the fact Naruto had left his orbs on standby as they had their test of will and power through their exchanged blows. Looks like you're a lot better than last time, Sasuke said with a chuckle, finally breaking through Naruto's defenses, planting a firm kick to Naruto's chest, causing him to skid back a few feet. Nothing too serious, enough to show he meant business though. Naruto rubbed his chest lightly then smirked. During their fray, Naruto had managed to get his variation of the Hiraishin symbol on Sasuke without him noticing, so he appeared in front of Sasuke with a golden flash, startling the last Uchiha a bit, sending him on the defensive end this time. You're no pushover yourself, Naruto commented truthfully. Last time they were here, he just wanted to land a scratch on Sasuke, but this time, he wanted to land a full blow on Sasuke. As they battled nail to tooth, they both vented out their anger, frustration, and rage in the only effective way they knew how, wailing on each other. Sasuke was starting to sweat under the onslaught of Naruto's flurry of blows. During their trading of blows, Naruto had managed to form the hand signs for his signature move, the Kage Bushin no Jutsu. Now he was facing down two Narutos instead of just one. Damn it, this Dobi really isn't playing around. If I don't cut the bullshit out, I will really lose. Sasuke thought frantically to himself, as he leapt back several feet. It only have him enough time to finish the hand signs of the first stage of Chidori, as Naruto had used the time to have the clone help him finish molding a Rasengan. Just like old times huh? Sasuke asked, facing his palm parallel to the ground as the sound of 1,000 chirping birds in a mini tornado entered the air. Naruto nodded, and activated the Hiraishin seal again, thinking he would appear in front of Sasuke, but when he arrived, Sasuke was no longer in front of him. Where did the Tem go? Naruto thought to himself. The familiar sound of entered his ears, signaling Sasuke was behind him. Sasuke was snickering. Why was he snickering? It dawned on him that they both decided to go on the offensive by teleporting closer to the other, but since they both had the same idea, they only had taken each other's places. He had to admit that was pretty funny, letting out a few chuckles. Wow, that's what we call a major fail huh? Naruto admitted, never dropping his Rasengan, Sasuke returning in kind, by keeping his Chidori up as well. Sasuke nodded, and this time opted to just run at Naruto, which the blonde also did, flying at his rival with breakneck speeds. Both intent on ending this match with this one blow. Time to end this, Sasuke exclaimed, outstretching his hand towards Naruto, which he mirrored. Rasengan, Chidori, the familiar dark gray bubble as their jutsus collided appeared, joining them in one of the strongest techniques known to man or god. Tak no Jutsu. Naruto stood up from his kneeling position, and looked at Sasuke with cool and collected eyes, matching Sasuke's. Remember the last time we were here? Last time we were here you had nearly killed Karen, and attacked Sakura. Even as I begged you to just come back to the village while you still could back then. Naruto admitted truthfully, causing Sasuke to flinch lightly at the words. I truthfully hated you for so long. You abandoned me and your friends, you were one of my few friends back then. Sasuke's breath hitched at this revelation, his eyes widening a bit as well. The Dobi actually hated me. That's a strong word for someone as kind-hearted as him. Sasuke thought to himself, taking Naruto's words to heart as this was something not to be taken lightly coming from the number one knucklehead ninja. I actually hated you for a long time, until recently I still hated you. I held so tightly to the belief that you made me weak with your ideals, up until the fight with Kagaya, I saw those ideals are what make you truly strong. Naruto smirked a bit at this, but inside he was a bit hurt that Sasuke had actually hated him until recently. Well, I can't become Hokage if I'm weak, can I? Datbeo. Naruto exclaimed lightly, pumping his fist into the air, causing Sasuke to chuckle at his openness. It was a truly nice sight for change for the Uchiha. Sasuke shook his head a bit as he chuckled. This knucklehead still hasn't changed a bit, but I wouldn't have it any other way from my friend. Sasuke thought to himself, shocking himself as he so easily thought of Naruto as a friend, not just a rival, or a nuisance that was getting in his way. Yeah, you can't, and I can't call some weakling my friend, can I? Sasuke asked curiously, raising an eyebrow to Naruto. Naruto's smile brightened to a seemingly unbelievable amount. Sasuke had only ever once called Naruto his friend, so this was a very special occasion for the both of them. You know, I honestly think things can go back to the way they used to be now, no. Even better than they used to be. When I become Hokage, you will be my advisor. Naruto exclaimed lightly, causing Sasuke's eyebrow to twitch lightly at this. Sasuke's eyes were now covered by his bangs, and a dark aura surrounded him for a second. I still plan on becoming the Hokage. Not for the same dark reason, but don't count me out yet. He exclaimed in light annoyance at Naruto's proclamation before calming down a few moments later. Though when I become Hokage, you will be my advisor, how does that sound? Be happy, Sasuke said with a fake haughty attitude. He honestly wanted Naruto to be his right-hand man if he became Hokage. Naruto was a great ninja. He also held the aptitude for being a great advisor on various subjects that may come up with training. Naruto's bangs now covered his bangs, mirroring Sasuke's earlier look. You know you'll become Hokage over my dead body. Not even then, Naruto exclaimed lightly, looking back at his best friend, and long-term rival. The white area surrounding them slowly faded, as it gave way to a now rain-filled final valley, where they stood in a now sizable crater, one of the few lone islands at the bottom of the waterfall. Sasuke rolled his eyes in joking mock of Naruto's statement. I don't believe words, only actions, though I do believe you have won this match. Sasuke simply stated, falling backwards due to chakra exhaustion, and just plain exhaustion from their earlier battle with Naruto's soon-to-be wife. Naruto gained a smirk on his face, then suddenly exhaustion hit him like a ton of bricks. He also hit the ground. Damn, that was an intense match. I barely was able to keep you from passing out due to exhaustion. The only thing holding up your pal over there was pure will, and what chakra he had left. Naruto chuckled lightly at this, wincing in pain as he realized the kick Sasuke left earlier had probably cracked his chest bone a bit, but Kurama was currently almost finished healing this along with other broken bones. Thanks Kurama, I owe you for this one, Naruto commented, and Kurama nodded at this. Damn right you do, Kurama exclaimed lightly, cutting the link between the two. Even though Kurama had made that rude comment, he knew that Kurama still cared about him, otherwise he'd be dead by now. Sasuke managed to sit up, placing his right arm on his knee, and looked at the splayed out on the ground, chuckling a bit at this sight. With the way it seems now, you'd swear I had won, but that was a great match. I haven't felt this stress-free since our last match on the rooftop all those years back. Sasuke commented with a wistful tone to his voice, the remorse for his past actions apparent in his voice. Both Naruto and Sasuke noticed the rest of Team 7's presence before they heard Sakura. "Hey Sasuke, Naruto, are you guys okay?" she exclaimed to be heard over the waterfall, climbing down the wall towards them. Sasuke and Naruto chuckled at their sometimes overprotective pink-haired teammate and Naruto sat up, sitting cross-legged. "Yeah, we're fine. A few good bumps or bruises, that's all," Naruto called back with a wave to the pink-haired woman as she approached them. Their collective thoughts were, "Oh shit," as Sakura approached them with her bangs covering her eyes, with both fists back in a baka punch. Sasuke tried to move, but his body didn't respond as a reaction to his exhaustion, and the killer intent Sakura was leaking. From what he could tell, Naruto wasn't doing much better. Sakura-chan. Sasuke trailed lightly, causing Sakura to pause lightly. It had been years since he had called her that, it had caught her off guard. Sakura shook this off, and returned to glaring at the two. "What are you two idiots doing? After a fight like that you guys should be resting. Not duking it out like the Raikage B," Sakura exclaimed, as she clocked the frozen men over the head with a chakra-enhanced baka punch at their oversight. Naruto was the first to dig himself from the Naruto-sized hole that Sakura had helped him create. "Ait, God Sakura-chan, were you trying to kill us?" Naruto asked as he rubbed the top of his head. Sasuke pulled himself from his hole as well, and sighed, nodding at Naruto's comment. "I could swear I saw the Shinigami for a minute." Sasuke trailed a bit, rubbing the spot where she had hit. Kakashi finally walked up after taking his sweet time, placing a hand on Sakura's head, stopping another blow to her other teammates' heads. Ma, it's not time for this right now, it's time for us to celebrate," Kakashi said, smiling at his team. "I think this more than warrants a party, don't you think?" Kakashi asked lightly, giving Naruto a knowing wink. Sakura had informed him of how they had won the war on the way there. Naruto sighed a bit at this. Kakashi knowing right away was bad. He had seen his sensei writing in a book about the size of Jiraiya's ICCA series books. Meaning he was probably going to continue the Sannin series himself. Now he had something he could base it on, aside from the normal plot that was seen in erotic novels. "Yeah, it is time for a well-deserved dip in a hot spring, and a party," Naruto exclaimed lightly, causing everyone to chuckle at his antics, but they had to admit, that sounded like paradise right now. 3 hours later, back in the Leaf Village, it had been barely touched by the Jubi's Biju blast. That had spread as far as the eye could see, which surprised Team 7 as they got back, but now there was a sizable dent in their gate. Not only that, but about the size of Kurama, with his tail spread, part of the forest was now gone. "Man, that sure was tiring, though I am thankful for this hot spring that the Jubi blast had unearthed, and for Yamato building something around it," Naruto thought as he laid his head back against the ground as he relaxed into the water, letting all of his tension and worries melt away from him. Sasuke lounged across from him in the water, and nodded in affirmation at this. "Nothing is better than taking a long, hot soak after fighting two gods in one day," Sasuke said with a chuckle. Then they heard the sliding door that led to the hot springs open again, which was odd. Because Kakashi had fallen asleep right in between the two males, and Sakura was just beyond the divider that Yamato had installed. Along with they had reserved the hot springs for at least an hour for their enjoyment. It's not a big one like in most anime. Naruto looked over his shoulder, and his eyes widened along with his jaw dropping. Before him was a barely clothed at all Kaguya, wearing nothing but a towel around her sizable assets, bigger than Sakura, but smaller than Hinata. Kaguya-chan, Naruto exclaimed, pinching his nose to stop the nosebleed that was now trying to break free. Sasuke's head snapped up, and so did Kakashi's at the mention of Naruto's fiancé. "What are you doing here? This is a male-only section of the hot springs," Sasuke said, keeping his cool. he was still wary of the silver-haired woman, but it didn't show in his expressions or voice. Kakashi grabbed his little blue book from his bag, and started writing something in it, muttering something about new book material, before a water ball appeared above his head, drenching his upper half in water. Including his precious new book material, little blue book. Ah, no, Kakashi dramatically exclaimed. Kagaya giggled a little bit at Kakashi's dismay, and the little prank she had just pulled. She didn't mind too much for perverts like Kakashi, cause secretly she was a closet pervert. Though that didn't mean she wanted to be the next leading female role in that perverted book of his. Well, I want to bathe with my fiancé, I don't see you guys outright rejecting the idea. She said with a knowing smirk. They may have hid it well to most, but she could feel the other two males eyeing her body in jealousy of Naruto. Naruto had finally managed to stop his nosebleed when Kagaya had gotten into the water, causing her decently sized to float playfully on the top of the water. Causing Naruto to mentally curse, muttering something about, "This woman will be the death of me," as he tilted his head back. Sasuke nodded. He had to admit, she looked good, but there was only one woman he would truthfully react like Naruto did to her for. Well, I see no problem with letting you stay, after all, this is our hot springs for the next hour. Earning him a glare from his yellow-haired counterpart. Kakashi gave Sasuke an eye smile, and looked back to Naruto, who was looking at him with hopeful eyes, but only to be dashed by the openly perverted sensei of theirs. If he's fine with it, then I am too. Kakashi said truthfully, much to Naruto's dismay. This was a good learning experience for the womanly inept kid. Naruto grumbled at this, but he had to admit, he had a beautiful woman next to him. She was a downright bombshell in his eyes, so he wasn't too torn up about the unanimous decision. Well, since we're here together, I am going to have to figure out how to get you into the village without everyone immediately wanting your head on a platter, or worse. Naruto admitted, dropping the mood in the room a few notches. Kagaya flinched a bit at the way he worded it, but nodded as well, knowing this was a problem they would soon have to address. The civilians would be no problem, because they hadn't seen how she looked, so they would not wonder why there was a new face in the village after the alliances. Though that would mean that they would have to get the ninja to agree to at least be silent about her origins. This is true, this is quite a puzzling conundrum. We can't use a henge, cause most ninjas can see through it pretty quickly. She threw the idea into the air, trailing a bit as she realized how quickly that plan may fail. Kakashi, the smartest one in the group, with an IQ on par with most Naras, was thinking hard about this, before he came up with an idea. Well, how about we tell the truth? Kakashi asked, completely serious, causing everyone else to look at him as if he was dumber than a bag of rusty hammers. They all looked at him to explain further as they realized he might be onto something. Well, Kagaya did revive everyone within the 48-hour window before the soul truly leaves this world, so no one really died during the Great Ninja War. Along with the fact she wasn't actually in control when she went on a rampage, so there may be a few resentful factions, but most will be happy to have a godlike woman on their side now. Kakashi finished. Everyone nodded at this. Kakashi was right, that was the best possible plan, given the alternatives that had a chance of backfiring on all of them. Naruto had to admit, this straightforward plan had a pretty good chance at success, and if he was going to be married to her, he was going to marry her, they were going to stay in his village. Because her village no longer existed by normal means of the word. So the best bet was to make everyone as comfortable as possible around her. Okay, we will go with that plan, when we go to see Oba-chan later to see who will succeed her as to being Hokage. We will run the plan by her, or whoever the Hokage is, and get permission to gather every ninja to hopefully get them to understand. Naruto commented, and everyone nodded at this course of action. Later that evening on the top of the Hokage Tower, Tsunade was currently wheelchair-bound, on orders of current head of the hospital, one Sakura Haruno, much to Tsunade's dismay. She was a medic too, and would have discharged herself if it hadn't been for the incessant insisting of her pink-haired student. "Quiet down everyone," Tsunade said, projecting her voice. "As you can see, we're all alive and well. Surprisingly, no one had died during the war. Though we had quite a few close calls with the critically wounded. Though thanks to the quick thinking and skill of my student, along with the medical corps, we saved them." Tsunade exclaimed lightly. The crowd burst into light applause. In the crowd were the Konoha 9, who were intently listening to what Tsunade said, namely Naruto. He was really looking forward to seeing who the next Hokage would be. Tsunade waited for the applause to die down, and when it did, she continued. "Though I want to say, do not forget this day, forgive those you once called enemies, they helped us in our time of need." She said lightly, the other villages present at her speech grateful at this. "As of today, I will be resigning as your Hokage, and passing the will of fire onto the Rokudaime Hokage," she said, causing the crowd to grow silent at this. The ninja of the village had seen this coming for quite a while now. Tsunade was going gray a bit with the stress this job gave her. "I would now very much like to announce the Rokudaime Hokage." She paused for dramatic effect, before sending Naruto a smirk, which confused him a bit. "Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, the hero of the Fourth Great Ninja War," she exclaimed, and the crowd, which stretched as far as the eye could see in the village, erupted with applause and congratulations. The only one not truly celebrating was aforementioned Kid. Naruto was absolutely stunned right now. He had not only pretty much single-handedly stopped the Fourth Great Ninja War, but he was now the Rokudaime Hokage. All of his friends and loved ones, minus one Kagaya for now, were around him, cheering for him, and giving him hugs, which he happily, but numbly returned. It was when he heard his name again did he wake from his stupor. Tsunade was motioning for him to come up there, and make a speech. "Come on, kid, I'm not getting any younger," she exclaimed, causing the crowd to laugh at her comment. Naruto pretty much bolted up the side of the Hokage tower and made it to the top in no time flat. "I present you the Rokudaime Hokage," she exclaimed, sending the crowd into a happy frenzy again, taking a moment or two to calm down again. As the crowd awaited his first words since being appointed Hokage, Naruto gulped slightly, not wanting to let them down with some stupid speech. "I, Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, the Rokudaime Hokage, swear to protect you with everything in me, no matter who the enemy, foreign or domestic. I just really want to say, I love you guys, you made me into the man I am today." Naruto exclaimed. The crowd cheered at this, and even more as the Hokage cloak and hat were put onto him. They had been finished just a few moments ago. Much to Naruto's ecstaticness, the Howry read, "Rokudaime Hokage." It was fashioned after a mix of his father's Hokage Howry, along with his Sage Mode Howry. It was red with black flames like his father's along the bottom. "Let the will of fire burn brightly in all of you," Naruto exclaimed as he turned away from the crowd that was now partying about their excitement. Even the gloom of recent events couldn't keep them down now. Their savior several times over now, was now their Hokage. They all knew it was his lifelong dream to become Hokage. A few minutes later in his new office, Naruto sat down in the chair he had sat down in once before for a day when he and Tsunade made the bet about if he could handle being Hokage for a day. "Wow, I'm really here, aren't I?" he mused out loud, and then Kagaya phased in from whatever dimension she had hid herself in for the time being. The Anbu hidden in the room flinched. They had by all means known who she was, even though Naruto had convinced them to at least forgive her past transgressions which were out of control. She still scared the shit out the hardened warriors. Someone that even their Hokage couldn't defeat wasn't someone to trifle with. Kagaya smiled at Naruto, and straddled him lightly, not caring that she had an audience currently. She just wanted to be close to her man. "Well, it seems you have finally achieved your goal. That deserves a reward," she said, with a devious smile on her face. "Close your eyes, Naruto-kun," Kagaya said softly. Naruto was a bit apprehensive about this, but didn't sense any malice from the woman on top of him, so he obliged. Naruto wondered what the reward was that he needed to close his eyes, but mentally shrugged it off. Kagaya-cha. As all he could get out as he was interrupted by the feeling of something soft and supple against his lips, soon realizing it was Kagaya's lips on top of his. Wow, so this is what a female's lips feels like. They're amazing, I could get used to this feeling. Naruto thought to himself, wrapping his arms around her waist, instinctively pulling her closer to him, softly caressing her back as their kiss deepened a bit. Much to both of their dismay, Kagaya pulled back from the kiss with a slightly drunken look on her face. Though she smiled soon after, laying her head on his chest, just enjoying his heartbeat. Naruto was splayed out on the bed, unable to sleep because in all of his years of being on this planet, he had never had someone else occupying the bed also. Along with the fact he had finally achieved his lifelong dream of becoming the Hokage, he just hadn't expected it to be so soon. Take that too, San. I surpassed you. I became Hokage at only 19 years of age. Naruto silently thought to himself, pumping his fist softly, as to not wake the sleeping Kagaya, who currently had her head on his chest, an arm draped over his chest. Kagaya was sleeping contently on Naruto, softly snoring, dreaming of various things, namely Naruto. Somewhere else in the village, Sasuke was sitting on top of the Hokage monument, the beginning of Naruto's sculpture of his head on the side of the mountain. The mountain carver had even gotten the rest of the village to agree to let him place Naruto's likeness next to his father's, and move the rest further down. Yes, it would take longer to carve, but he was content with doing this, because Naruto had saved the world. The Dobi has definitely gotten better than I remember, though I don't mind being his advisor, means I can be close to him. It also will make up for the time I tried to kill him. Sasuke thought to himself. The shinobi had let him come back to the village, albeit a bit reluctantly, given his past transgressions against the village. Though they couldn't deny that he had been very influential in the turning of the war, along with the fact having the last Uchiha in their village made them that much stronger. Sakura came up from behind Sasuke, who still stood still. Though he had noticed her, he made no move to break out of his memories. "Hey Sasuke," she called out lightly. This caused Sasuke to look over his shoulder, and raised an eyebrow at the pinkett. "What's up, Sakura-chan?" Sakura blushed a bit at the fact she had been called Chan again. Her first love was still strong, but hidden in her. "Can't sleep either, huh?" she commented lightly. Sasuke nodded at this. Sasuke patted the spot next to him, and Sakura gratefully sat down next to him. "Yeah, this is all but odd. The village is so different than last time I was here. Though it is a thriving village from what I can see," Sasuke said with a small smile, though the pain was apparent in his eyes. The things he did to this village in the past, and its nin would haunt him for the rest of his life, though that didn't stop him from trying to repent. Sakura noticed the pain in his eyes, cupping his hand, and laying her head on his shoulder. "It's okay, Sasuke. You don't have to hold back your pain anymore," Sakura commented lightly, giving Sasuke's hand a light smile. Sasuke nodded, returning her squeeze back, releasing a sigh. "Yeah, I'll tell you on another day, but not right now." Sasuke trailed lightly, and gave her a soft smile. "You remember all those dates you asked me on in the past?" Sasuke asked lightly. He never forgot anything about the woman next to him had said to him, or asked him, and she nodded at this, not entirely following where Sasuke was going. "Will you go on an impromptu date with me?" Sakura's eyes widened at this, turning as bright red as a tomato, but she nodded at this. "I'd love to go on a date with you," Sakura said with a happy smile about what had just happened. Sasuke's smile brightened a bit. "All right. Well, how about we the Akamichi barbecue? Naruto's ramen addiction never took hold with me," Sasuke said with a chuckle, and stood, helping Sakura up to her feet. Sasuke and Sakura went on their date, completely oblivious to their blonde teammates' inner turmoil. The next day rolls around. Naruto sat behind his desk, flying through paperwork, barely reading it, enough to get the gist of what it was about. Gah, how did Ba-chan do it without pulling her hair out? Naruto thought out loud, then an idea popped into his head. Yada, he exclaimed, forming the hand signs for his signature jutsu. After a moment, the room filled with smoke. As it cleared out of the window, about 10 clones were in the room. As the clones looked to their creator to see what their mission was, then as he pointed at the paperwork mountains on the table, they started to grumble to themselves. The faster we get this done, the faster we can go home and eat ramen. Naruto exclaimed, and the clones perked up at the prospect of their favorite dish, and dived into the paperwork. Well, I'm glad that this will go by a lot quicker, he thought to himself, picking up another paper, the sender bringing his full attention to the contents of the paper. It read, "Hey son, I guess you can figure out who this is soon. You were a brilliant tactician during the battle against Kagaya. I wrote this during the time we had a little downtime. I knew my time in this world again was limited, but at least I got to spend some time with you, and see you. Your mom will be extremely jealous when I get back. Chuckle, well anyway, I don't have much time, seems the battle is kicking back up. I want you to know I'm proud of you, my son. Never forget that." Naruto's breath hitched at this. They had told him this before, but this still made him very happy to see, and now whenever he felt down he could just read this again. Then he began reading again. Well, at the bottom of the page, there is a seal that holds a few jutsus that I had made or perfected in my time. I'm sure you can use them more than I can right now, and put them to better use. Hey, well, it's time to get back to saving this world again. Oh, and congratulations on becoming Hokage. You finally got one up on me, it seems. Tsunade told me, if I survive this, I'm going to name your brat Hokage, and retire. Anyway, me and Kushina love you. Minato Namikaze, the father of the Rokudaime Hokage. Naruto had a big smile on his face, a few small tears dropped from his eyes, tears of happiness. He looked up, and noticed that his clones were watching him intently. What are you doing? You don't want ramen, Naruto exclaimed lightly, snapping them back to their job. Kagaya giggled, wrapping her arms around Naruto's midsection, leaning her chin on his shoulder. Relax, it's just me, Itoshidezu, she said softly as she felt Naruto tense in her embrace. Naruto turned around as he heard her voice. He visibly relaxed, leaning lightly against her. This was going to take some getting used to, but it felt good to have someone hold him in something that wasn't a headlock. Somewhere Sakura sneezed. Naruto chuckled, and turned around in her grip. As he did, he saw how she entered. Black cracks in the dimension seamed themselves back together. Don't sneak up on a ninja like that, it isn't very wise, especially given I am the Hokage now, Naruto said, motioning with his head to the Anbu, who were currently stopped with their katanas drawn, ready to try and strike down the godlike woman before them. Naruto waved them off, and they relaxed, returning to their posts in the room. Kagaya nodded, letting Naruto go. As he sat down in his chair, she sat in his lap, impeding him doing his work. How about instead of you doing this boring paperwork, we go on our first official date? I'd like to get to know the man I am supposed to spend the rest of my natural life with, Kagaya commented, and Naruto looked at the paperwork, sighing. Even with clones it was still going to take the better part of a day to finish. Naruto shook his head, giving her a soft smile. No can do, I have to finish this paperwork, otherwise I will just have to do what I didn't today tomorrow, he said. To be honest, he wanted to learn more about her also. There were so many things he could learn from her. After all, she was the progenitor of all things jutsu, and chakra related. Kagaya thumped his forehead softly. Why not just replace yourself with a clone also? That way the workforce is not short-handed, and they still get everything done, she asked curiously. Naruto had to admit her plan had made a lot of sense, and he couldn't fault her logic, though there was his advisor he had to contend with. Because Sakura wouldn't be fooled by a simple clone. His ex-teammate was now head of the Medic Nin Corp, and advisor to the Hokage. it was a post that Sakura took without a moment's hesitation. Believing that she was one of the only ones who could truly get through his thick skull, even if it was with a fist. Don't worry about her, as long as the paperwork gets done she will just have to get over herself. Kagaya said as a matter of factly. Naruto's eyes widened a bit at this. Everyone knew Sakura's inhuman strength, so even the one stronger than her just went along with what she said to avoid a baka punch. Naruto chuckled. He was beginning to like Kagaya more and more by the moment. She was one of the only people aside from him that stood up against Sakura. Albeit Naruto had only done it once or twice, but that's more than can be said for some ninja under him. Well, I cannot fault your logic, so let's go. How about we head to Akamichi Barbecue? Naruto asked lightly, and Kagaya nodded, getting up, letting Naruto up. Kagaya lightly grabbed Naruto's hand, interlacing her fingers with his. She shared his sentiments about this feeling odd. She hadn't felt a man's touch since her late husband. Setsura Otsuki, he was a kind and gentle man, who would do anything for those he cared about. She saw a lot of him in Naruto. Well, is this place any good? Kagaya asked lightly, looking over to the blonde cage next to her. Naruto shrugged. I have never personally been, but all my friends rave about how their food is so good, so I decided to give it a try. Can't just take you to my favorite ramen shop for our first date now, can I? Naruto wasn't a complete loss when it came to wooing women. During his time in the land of snow, during their downtime together, Koyuki had taught him a few things about making a woman happy on a date. Kagaya nodded, and let Naruto lead the way. She had only been in the village for 2 days, so she had pretty much no idea where anything was. Really, as long as we enjoyed ourselves, I'd be fine with anywhere we went, Naruto. She commented lightly with a soft smile. It was true, but Naruto wanted to make their date kind of special. And what better way than a dinner date followed by the best view in the village? A few minutes later, the Akamichi barbecue was reconstructed several times, but now it was a 2-story building. When you entered there was a certain calm ambience that just relaxed you. Along with a soft music playing in the background, it was a good place to have a first date. Naruto went over to Choji, and whispered something in his ear. Kagaya really didn't bother to try and listen into what he was saying, but it seemed to be something about her because of the occasional glance her way. Thank you, man, I really appreciate it, Naruto said with a bright grin on his face, looking at his old friend. Choji returned the infectious grin, and nodded. It's all good, it's the least I can do for one of my best friends, and the cage of my village. Choji said, slapping Naruto on his back lightly, putting him in a light headlock. Better give me a good review though, got it? My food is top-notch, Choji said in a low voice, tightening his grip lightly on Naruto. The cage chuckled a little bit, and switched himself with a chair. Alright, I got it, you better serve me the best you have then, Naruto exclaimed lightly, and Choji nodded, gaining a determined look on his face. Kagaya chuckled a little at this trait of friendship, and followed Naruto as he started moving towards the back of the store, reaching a black door set into the darker red wall. What's in there, Naruto-kun? She asked curiously, her head to the side, giving Naruto a curious look. Naruto lightly grabbed her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. This is Choji's VIP room, I guess you could say, complete privacy here, privacy seals and everything, Naruto said, and opened the door to the slightly less lit room, but it was still visible in there. The table was lit by a candle, with romantic music playing in the background. This definitely was a more romantic part of the restaurant. Kagaya observed the room, slowly panning her sight around the room. She had to admit, Naruto really did know a thing or two about romance, glad she gave him the benefit of the doubt. Well, this is definitely a romantic setting, I wonder how the food here tastes, Kagaya said, giving his hand a light squeeze. Naruto closed the door behind them, and nodded, sitting at the seat across from her. It was a C-shaped seat, but Naruto wasn't going to take any chances of sitting close to her. just in case she mistook him being close for an attempt at doing something perverted while they're alone. Kagaya appreciated the gentlemanly gesture of not sitting too close to her on the date, but she honestly wanted him closer. Something just made her want to be close to the blonde knucklehead. You can come closer, Naruto. I won't bite, I promise. Kagaya said with a reassuring smile, but she was thinking, I won't bite much, allowing herself a perverted giggle at the thought. Naruto raised a wary eyebrow at her little perverted giggle, but nodded, sliding closer, closing the distance to about half of what it was. Sorry about that, but I didn't want it to seem like I was trying to be a pervert or anything. Naruto admitted. This time Kagaya slid closer, closing the rest of the gap. Kagaya smiled at his truthfulness, and laid her head on his shoulder, sighing contently. It's fine, Naruto, though if you do try anything I don't like, I'll have to remove your friend. She said, causing all the guys in the restaurant to cover their precious lower heads in fear of the threat that had been placed. Even Naruto cringed at that prospect, but he would take it slow with her too, because he was new to this, so he didn't want to push her away. She can make such a vicious threat while having such a cute look on her face. She really is a force to be reckoned with. Naruto thought to himself, relaxing, and laying his head softly on hers, as the door opened. Both of the room's occupants looked up to see a waitress being let in the room by his Anbu guard detail, which followed him around even in the village for security purposes. The waitress bowed lightly to her cage, and smiled softly at the cute couple before her. I'm honored to be your waitress today. Can I start you with an appetizer, or a drink? She asked, her soft smile never wavering. Naruto nodded, and took the offered menu from her, and perused it for a moment or two. Agadashi tofu, and some cold tea please. It looks pretty good. What about you, Kagaya-chan? Naruto asked curiously. Kagaya sat up, and looked at the menu, taking a few moments herself. I'll have the sukune, and some hot tea please. It's always been good seemingly wherever I go. Kagaya said with a smile. The waitress nodded and left the room, leaving the two occupants alone in the room once again. How can you drink hot tea? It's just nasty to me. Naruto exclaimed lightly, causing Kagaya to giggle lightly at his antics. She rolled her eyes lightly, and leaned her head back onto his shoulder. Because that's the way it's supposed to be consumed. She exclaimed lightly, causing Naruto to groan a bit in disgust. Naruto blanched at the prospect of having to drink warm tea again. He didn't unless in the rare occurrence he got sick, and had a sore throat. It's good for sore throats, but aside from that, I'll think cold tea is better. He exclaimed lightly, a foxish grin crossing his face. Kagaya couldn't help but mimic his grin. Hot tea is the nectar of gods. I should know, people used to revere me as a goddess. She said with a chuckle, causing Naruto to gain a light look of horror on his face. Take that back. Ramen and cold tea is the feast of the gods. He grumbled lightly, his eyes flicking to Kagaya's hand which had snaked its way up to his cheek without him noticing. What are yo? Is all that Naruto could get out, as Kagaya's hand could turned his head her direction. Then something unexpected happened. Naruto had felt something soft and supple against his lips. She is kissing me, Naruto thought in surprise. He really knew nothing about women, so it truly caught him off guard. Kagaya smiled in the middle of the kiss. She had felt a small spark that is fabled to happen between two compatible matches. Shut up and kiss me, she ordered, and Naruto gladly obliged. Naruto wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her a little closer. Deepening the kiss a bit, he loved the feeling of her lips on hers. Your lips feel so amazing. Naruto trailed lightly, a slightly drunk smile. Kagaya smiled back, and giggled, kissing his cheek. So do yours, but let's agree to disagree on Tiham. She asked lightly. She didn't like arguing with someone she cared about. Choji cleared his throat, garnering the attention of the two starstruck occupants. Your food is here, you two lovebirds. Choji said with a chuckle, causing both of the two occupants to blush brightly at this. Naruto tried speaking, but didn't trust his voice, so he just nodded, giving Choji a lopsided grin. Kagaya's blush was calming down faster than Naruto's. Normally she wouldn't be fazed by showing affection, but when she was caught off guard entirely, she blushed cherry red. "Thank you, it smells delicious," she said with a smile, accepting her appetizer, taking a deeper whiff of the food. "It looks even better than the picture," Kagaya said lightly, picking up her chopsticks, and trying a bit of the food. Letting out a light moan of satisfaction at the taste of the food. "I stand corrected, this is better than I've had before." Choji gained a smile on his face. He really loved having people enjoy and compliment his food, which was the main reason he took over his father's restaurant. "Why, thank you guys, I am glad you enjoy it, but don't get full on just this, the main course is still coming too," Choji said with a chuckle. Naruto nodded, and looked at the menu again, figuring out what he wanted to eat for the main course. "Chicken tonkatsu please," Naruto said. It looked on the menu, it looked pretty good to him. Kagaya looked over his shoulder, letting her chin rest on his broad, comfortable shoulder, perusing the menu. The katsudon looks pretty good." Choji nodded, taking the orders then bowing, heading to the kitchen, and started preparing their orders. The rest of the dinner date went pretty well in the restaurant. It ended in Naruto finally admitting there might be something better than ramen when Choji brought their dessert. He now knew a new love for red velvet cake. Naruto chuckled lightly as they left the restaurant, rubbing his slightly bulging stomach from eating so much. "Man, Choji can cook. I am glad I didn't go to Ichiraku's for food today," he said, and started heading for his favorite spot to just think, relax, or appreciate the village in all its beauty. Kagaya was curious as to where they were going, because they obviously weren't heading for the Hokage mansion as they veered off the path towards the Hokage mansion. "Where are we going?" she asked lightly, giving Naruto a kiss on his cheek, not really caring where they went, as long as they were together. Naruto just kept quiet as they walked closer to the top of the Hokage monument. "We're just going to my favorite place in the world. The top of my father's head being part of the Hokage monument. It is a great place to think, and just relax here," Naruto said, sitting down on the top of the first blonde Kage's head. Kagaya nodded, and sat down next to him, pulling him gently down, putting his head into her lap. "Well, this is a beautiful sight, where you can see all of the village," Kagaya said, absent-mindedly running her fingers through the blonde Kage's hair as he relaxed with his head on her lap. Naruto sighs contentedly and smiles up at Kagaya, reaching up and stroking her cheek with his thumb, his palm cupping her cheek. He couldn't say for sure if he had feelings for her, but he did have a good interest in her, and could feel something taking root inside of him, or was that indigestion? Nah, it was feelings. Could swear a movie or show somewhere had trolled like that at one point. Anyone know? Kagaya was the first one to wake up, and she thought about making Naruto breakfast after he had fallen asleep right after their love-making session, but she realized something. She didn't really know how to use any of the devices Naruto had in his kitchen. Hell, she was a goddess, but she couldn't figure her way around a kitchen. What does this switch do? Kagaya mused silently as she turned the knob, and it did nothing at first, but after a few moments she could feel the element warming up on the stove top. As she wandered around the kitchen she looked for something to cook, only to realize that Naruto didn't have much in the way of actual food, so she'd have to go buy some more. So that's exactly what she did after writing a note telling Naruto where she was going after turning off the oven. Naruto woke up a few hours later to a cold other side of the bed and he looked around to see if he could find Kagaya, but he couldn't. So he got out of bed and saw the note on the nightstand and began reading it. "Hey Naruto, I've gone to the market to pick up some food, all you have is that horrendous instant ramen stuff, but I shall be back soon." The note read in her handwriting. Sure enough, a few moments after he finished reading the note, Space started to distort in front of him before a horizontal black line with cracks running up and down it opened in front of him. I'm back, Naruto. You'd be surprised at how hard it is to find the market here. I had to wander around town like a normal person to not freak everyone out. Kagaya said as she set her bags down on the table. Though something amazing happened when I got there. A lot of the merchants recognized me as the wife of the savior, and their cage, and just gave me what I asked for. Seems our fight did come with some perks. She mused with a soft giggle. Naruto rubbed the sleep from his eyes and chuckled a little at this. If he had known, he would have gone with her, and insisted on paying, but he wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth. Well, good morning to you, Kagaya, and that's awesome, Dadbeo. So what's for breakfast? Naruto asked curiously as he sat down at the dining room table. Kagaya let the stove heat up before turning back to Naruto. Well, just your typical breakfast for now with scrambled cheese, eggs, bacon, toast, and pancakes. She said simply as she turned back to the oven, thinking it might be a good idea to put on an apron so the bacon didn't pop her. She might have tough skin, but that didn't mean she liked pain, at least the type that comes from being popped with grease, she thought with a quiet pervy giggle as she put on the apron over her stark front, giving Naruto a wonderful view to enjoy. Naruto held back a nosebleed that threatened to force its way out, but he had a busy day dealing with paperwork so he couldn't have any more fun for now. That sounds good to me, and it's already smelling good. Naruto commented. He normally just cooked a cup of ramen or 12 and went about his day, but he would let her cook for him. As much as he loved ramen, it did get kind of boring and stale after eating it so much. Naruto got up to put the extra that Kagaya wasn't using in the fridge before wrapping his arms around her waist. Kagaya hummed a soft tune as she cooked breakfast for the both them, leaning into Naruto's grip, feeling content and warm, feeling her heart rate picking up a bit at the intimate touch. You're rather more affectionate than I at first expected, but I like it. She mused softly, turning and angling her head so they could share a soft kiss. Naruto chuckled a bit and kissed her back. Well, there's a lot of backed up loving of someone I haven't done, so I will show you that. Naruto said softly before a thought popped into his head as he realized there was still something left undone. Hey, when would you like to have our wedding? You kind of did assert yourself as my mate and fiancé. Naruto mused out loud, causing Kagaya to gain a thoughtful look on her face at his question. Kagaya thought about it for a moment, and came up with a good idea. Well, how about this Christmas coming up in a couple of months? I always wanted a white winter wedding, my last one was in the spring. Kagaya said with a bit of a sad tone to her voice. Naruto gave her waist a light squeeze, bringing her out of her getting darker thoughts before he nodded, rubbing his stubble against her cheek, causing her to giggle at the sensation. That's fine by me, and oh, did that tickle? Naruto asked with a bit of a devious tone to his voice, and Kagaya froze as she tried to escape from Naruto's grip, but it was a vice around her waist. Kagaya knew that she was in for it now. Oh, don't you dare, Kagaya said as she rotated in Naruto's grip to face him as he pinned her up against the counter softly, and began tickling her with his stubble in his hands, causing Kagaya to burst into giggles and flailing. Naruto chuckled a bit deviously as he watched Kagaya flail and giggle at his ministrations before he suddenly stopped, allowing Kagaya to get her breath. You're ticklish. I shall take advantage of that whenever I want now. Naruto smiled softly as he let her go. Kagaya pouted lightly at his teasing, knowing he would keep his promise to keep abusing her with tickling, but since it was Naruto, she wasn't too upset about it. Fine, but only if I get to use you as my pillow whenever I want. Kagaya said with finality, and Naruto nodded. Then an idea popped into her head. Hey, Naruto, I was thinking about how we first met, and I'd like to propose something to you. I really don't have any actual combat training, and you probably would like to learn more about your sage powers, right? She asked, causing Naruto to nod, but look at her curiously, him piecing the meaning together. Naruto looked like a light bulb had gone off in his head as he figured out what she meant. You want to train with each other, right? That's fine by me, but we have to clear it by tease. Naruto started to say before he remembered he was now the Hokage, so he didn't have to clear it with anyone, so he grinned and nodded to give her his answer. Alright, that's fine by me, and I know somewhere where we can train in relative privacy. Naruto said with a small smile. He knew he couldn't convince the Anbu detail that was tailing him to leave them entirely alone, as they were there and weren't allowed to let him leave farther than they could see for security reasons. Kagaya grinned a bit as she figured out a way to evade their personal security detail and still stay safe. She leaned close to Naruto, knowing the Anbu were just outside the Hokage mansion, but she didn't want them hearing her plan. Well, you know how I can travel between dimensions, right? I don't need the Sharingan to do that, it's one of my intrinsic powers. She whispered with a conspiratorial grin as the realization dawned upon Naruto as to what she meant. Naruto nodded at what she was saying, as what she said made sense. They were still safe, and any new skills or techniques they created would have no chance of being found except for maybe by Sasuke. Alright, 1 second, Naruto said softly, creating his signature cross-hand sign as 10 clones popped into existence and nodded, knowing what they needed to do. One took off towards the Hokage tower with his robes on and his hat on his back. The clone's shunshi to the Hokage tower as the Anbu followed Naruto's clone. Right as we pan back to Naruto and Kagaya, the black crack in the fabric of space was stitching itself back up. Kagaya put Naruto down on the sand, as this was the best dimension she had that wasn't too hot or too cold. Alright, now that we're here, what not? She hadn't really thought of what to do once they actually got here. It was a kind of a spur-of-the-moment plan. Naruto gained a thoughtful look on his face as he thought about how they should start their training with each other, then he came up with an idea. Well, how about a spar so that we can find out where both of us are really at? 'Cause our first fight was with my team on its last legs, with low chakra, limiting what we could do. Naruto observed as he thought about the battle. Kagaya nodded in agreement. Even then she wanted to see what they could do at full capacity, but Madara had taken most of their fight out of them. Alright, that's fine by me, let's try this out, she said as she started undoing her kimono, catching Naruto off guard. Naruto's eyes widened a bit in surprise at what she was doing. "Wah, what are you doing?" Naruto exclaimed as he turned around. Even though they were engaged, it would still take some time getting used to her undressing in front of him. Kagaya her head curiously at Naruto, who was blushing, peeking at her. "What do you mean, Dana?" she asked curiously, causing Naruto to turn around just as he turned around. As he looked her over once, he noted that Kagaya actually had made a white bone version of Madara's combat armor before he entered Rakudo Sennin mode. A silver shirt, and pair of high-water pants akin to the Jonin outfit with a silver metal mesh underclothes on as well. Naruto let out a breath of relief that he wouldn't have to fight Kagaya with her, or nearly. That would be too distracting to him. "I thought you were going to spar with me in your underwear." Naruto trailed, chuckling sheepishly while rubbing the back of his head. Kagaya gained a small grin on her face, a black portal opening behind her as Naruto was distracted, another one opening right behind Naruto as her hands reached around him. One hand was under his chin, and the other was draped over his shoulder. "Oh, would you have preferred that, Dana?" she whispered with a bit of a teasing sultry tone in Naruto's ear. Naruto's eyes widened as he registered what had just happened, causing him to jump away from her on pure instinct trained over the years. "Wah, Kagaya, let's just stay like this is better, yeah, better for now." Trailed unconvincingly, the way he was saying it was just further proving Kagaya's point as he seemed to be trying to convince himself more than her. Kagaya just let out a soft laugh before stretching out a hand towards Naruto, giving him the "come at me" hand motion, signaling she was ready to spar. "I'm ready whenever you are, Naruto Dana," Kagaya said softly, her eyes changing from their normal impassive expression to one of hardened determination as she mimicked the stance Naruto was using. "Byakugan," she thought to herself as the veins on the side of her head became pronounced, signaling she had activated one of the bloodlines that had originated from her. Naruto drew a kunai from his thigh holster, not moving an inch after that, then began a stare-down between the two godly powerhouses. Okay, that's gonna make things harder. If I remember correctly from my battle with Neji, the Byakugan has 360-degree field of view. Naruto thought nervously to himself as a slow breeze passed by them. Kagaya had 3 times the visual range of most Hyuga, being the progenitor of the bloodline after all, so she could see every detail of Naruto. As the breeze stopped, Kagaya launched forward towards Naruto as if a proverbial starter gun was fired. "On guard, Naruto," she exclaimed, bringing her bone sword from above Naruto, starting her offensive. Naruto's eyes widened a bit as he almost didn't see her move. Was she actively trying to prevent from killing us during the war, and resisting the Edo Tensei? She wasn't this fast during our first battle. Naruto thought frantically himself, his muscles instinctively going up to block the bone sword. As the sword came into contact with his kunai, sparks flew. Kagaya spun 360 degrees, causing Naruto to let his kunai drop into his other hand in a reverse grip to block the sword strike from his right side. "Come on, you're gonna have to do better than that," Kagaya taunted jokingly as she then started swinging with unrefined power towards him. Naruto noted this as well. It seemed she really hadn't had any formal combat training, and had just slaughtered the warlords of her time with pure power. "We'll see who's tapping out. It's not gonna be me," Naruto said with a smirk as his eyes suddenly gained an orange rings of sage mode, and the bar pupil like a toad's on his eyes as he had subconsciously mastered taking in nature chakra over time, sort of like Sakura's Byakugo no In. Reaching for Kagaya's overextended arm, he grabbed it, swinging her overhead with ease, laying Kagaya flat on her back, causing Kagaya to cough a bit as the air was knocked from her lungs. Kagaya clenched her teeth as she rolled out of the way of a downward axe kick aimed to knock her out. "Seems you're not holding back. What's the rules? No kill shots?" she asked curiously as she had to dodge Naruto's swift attacks, which were enhanced by nature chakra. Thankfully, since she had her Byakugan activated, she could see each limb being prepped to attack before it happened as Naruto subconsciously channeled chakra into his limbs to hit harder. Naruto was getting a bit annoyed that someone who had no formal training in the ninja arts or even more than basic combat was easily dodging him. "Yeah, though we can't really test each other's limits if we hold back, can we?" he asked lightly, as he turned fully back around from a roundhouse kick which Kagaya had ducked under, causing Naruto to grin a bit. Kagaya her head curiously as to why Naruto was grinning, then she noticed the surge of chakra into his leg. She had done exactly what he wanted. It was hard to recover or dodge from an attack while crouched like this, so she brought her arms up to block the attack. "Good plan if I was anyone else," she said with her own faint grin as she caught Naruto's leg, tripping his other leg by extending her leg towards Naruto's leg he was using to stand quickly. Naruto's eyes widened a bit as the ground began approaching quickly after he was tripped. "You're pretty good so far, but let's see how you like this too," Naruto exclaimed as he tapped into Kurama's chakra, cloaking him a golden aura of his Rakudo Sennin form minus the truth orbs for now. He disappeared from Kagaya's grip, appearing a few feet away from Kagaya in a flash of gold, cracking his knuckles with his trademark foxish grin on his face. Kagaya was a bit. She became aware how warm and caring the chakra was that was coming off of Naruto. "Is that really Kurama's chakra?" she asked softly, as she hadn't paid it any attention, or moreover couldn't when they were fighting during the war. Though she just couldn't believe the furball, as she called him, could produce any feeling aside from pure hatred. Naruto's slit iris across his eyes became more pronounced, and his features became more feral as a cue that Kurama was in control for now. "Yes, Ka-san, that's my true power when my Jinchuriku and I come to team up instead of fighting for dominance," Kurama said, donning his own version of Naruto's foxish grin, but this one was more animalistic compared to Naruto's. Kagaya laughed softly, as she stood back up slowly, launching herself at Naruto again, causing him to disappear from view again. Kagaya easily finding Naruto after he reappeared. To the Byakugan, Kurama's chakra was like a beacon in a dark night for her, sending some bone shards from the tips of her fingers at Naruto at a frightening speed. The sound of several metallic clinks were heard as Naruto blocked the bone shards with his kunai. Kinda figured it would be hard to hide in this form from your Byakugan. Naruto mused as he stepped from behind a sand dune, disappearing again before appearing in front of Kagaya again. "Hey," Naruto said with a grin, before kissing Kagaya and disappearing again. Kagaya's eyebrow twitched in slight annoyance as he was making fun of her for not being as fast as him by this gesture-like act before pain flared in her upper arm. Reaching up to the spot where the pain came from, she found blood when she pulled her hand back. "Well, it has been a long time since anyone has been able to make me bleed. So I commend you on that. Only my own son, Hagoromo, landed an actual cut on me," Kagaya said as the wound healed. Naruto had actually been curious to see if she actually bled, as she was literally a goddess incarnate, so he didn't think it was possible for her to bleed. "Well, that answers that question," Naruto said with a chuckle before turning back to face Kagaya as they both dashed at each other, causing the ground to spiderweb crack a bit under the force they were using. Kagaya was struggling a bit to keep from being overpowered by Naruto, combing Sage Mode, and Kurama's chakra made him a physical powerhouse without her draining his chakra. "Well, this definitely is more fun than last time," Kagaya said with a chuckle, a smile crossing her face. Naruto flashed back a foot or so as a Rasengan formed in his hand with only one hand. He knew even if this actually hit her, it might annoy her at worst. "Let's see how you like this one," Naruto thought to himself as he infused some of the Kokuo's chakra into it. Charging at her, as Kagaya swung at his midsection with her sword, Naruto disappeared again right before contact. "Tsuchimu Rasengan," Naruto exclaimed as he hit her in her side with the Rasengan. Kagaya's eyes widened a bit as she was sent spiraling towards a tree, hitting it, and going through it one more, which cracked before falling over. "That actually hurt, Naruto-kun," Kagaya admonished with a sickly sweet smile on her face with her eyes closed. Naruto's celebration was cut short by the ki in the area grew as thick as molasses around him. "Oh crap, maybe I overdid it," Naruto thought to himself. Then just as it had appeared, the ki disappeared, causing Naruto's eyes to widen as he looked around frantically, trying to figure out where the next attack would come from, as it wasn't that easy for anyone to calm down really. A black portal cracked open the space right behind Naruto, and two arms wrapped around Naruto's waist. "Strength of 1000 suplex," Kagaya exclaimed as she bent over backward with Naruto still in her arms, slamming him into the rocks that were below their feet, causing it to crack before bowing into a half circle roughly twice the size of a typical Sakura chakra punch. Kagaya fell through a black portal before appearing in another one a few feet away. Naruto groaned as he peeled himself out of the person-sized crater that he had created, cracking his neck to get the kinks out of it that he had gained from the suplex. "Thanks, Kurama, that would have seriously hurt if you hadn't softened the ground," Naruto thought as he flashed out of the huge crater Kagaya had created using Naruto. A terse snort was heard and of Naruto's head from the one in question. "Well, I couldn't just let you be defeated that easily," Kurama said before laying his head back on his paws. It was easy for Kurama to use his chakra to essentially instantly turn the rock to sand anyway. Kagaya was a bit surprised that Naruto walked away from that still conscious, much less with nothing more than a sore neck. "That would take out anyone else, maybe even your friend Sasuke as well," Kagaya mused as she dropped her bone sword. It had started growing cracks in it from their last kunai to bone sword battle. Even if it was hardened, it was still bone. Naruto gained a determined look on his face as he noticed that Kagaya was starting to sweat heavily, gaining a grin on his face. "This will be a battle of attrition, as we both won't back down, and have inhuman stamina." So me subtly adding Kokuo's chakra into her, causing her temperature to raise and make her sweat should speed up that process. Naruto thought. His idiotic persona had been dropped when he went into battle. A ninja's best weapon was deception, and his idiotic personality was really just a front until combat made him serious. Kagaya fanned herself a bit as she noticed it was hotter than it was a moment before, and her armor was becoming a bit uncomfortable with the sudden temperature increase. Cleaver Naruto, using Kokuo's chakra to raise my internal temperature to make this battle end faster, but it'll take more than that to beat me. She analytically identified his plan. Naruto tsked at his plan being so easily being found out, then again he wasn't very subtle when it came to naming his new Rasengan. Here I was thinking I had managed to pull one over on you. Naruto said with a small chuckle before his hands came out in front of him, his fingers splayed out as a ball of purple and black chakra began to form in front of him. Kagaya an eyebrow at this technique. It seemed familiar but she couldn't quite place her finger on what it was, until she realized it was a powered-down version of what the Ten-Tail had used to level half of a mountain range. Crap, Biju Dama, Kagaya exclaimed mentally as her eyes widened. If she got hit by this, it wouldn't do any serious damage, but it would hurt a lot. Bringing up a hastily thickened wall of bone, she braced for impact. Naruto smirked, as he knew even with only this power level it would go through even a triple Rashomon barrier, so when it got to a satisfying level he let it loose. Sorry Kagaya-chan, but this is my match. Naruto exclaimed as he watched the Biju Dama impact the bone wall. After a few seconds of the devastating attack clearing, an entire sand dune was vaporized along with Kagaya, or so Naruto thought. Oh crap, I really overdid it now. I was sure she could easily survive that. Naruto thought frantically, thinking he had vaporized his fiancée. A melodic laughter was heard as a black portal opened behind Naruto again, feeling the edge of a sharp bone sword against his throat, causing him to relax a bit only to tense again at the blade. Sorry Naruto-kun, but it seems I win this one. I have to say, that would have hurt a lot, but thankfully my bone wall gave me enough time to get away. Kagaya said from behind Naruto. Her right arm's bone pauldron was gone, and her arm was pretty badly singed. Naruto raised his hands as he slowly turned around to face Kagaya with a foxish grin on his face. Well, it does seem I would lose if I hadn't already planned for this. Naruto said, motioning his hand to over her shoulder. Behind her was a Naruto clone in base form, with her focusing on his chakra signature. He was banking on the fact she wouldn't notice a basic clone trying to hide his signature. It seems this match is a draw, Naruto said as he put his hands down. The clone had a kunai aimed at Kagaya's kidneys, a hand on the O-ring of the kunai for extra force. Kagaya removed the bone sword from Naruto's neck, letting the bone sword dissipate back into bone shards, blowing away in the wind, causing the clone to disperse himself. It seems it is. That was fun. I haven't had that much fun in a long time, Dana, thanks for that. She said with a soft smile as she floated over towards Naruto, actively trying to walk normally soon. Naruto placed both hands behind his head as golden chakra cloak suddenly disappeared as it was deactivated. Hey, yeah, that was fun. We have to do that again sometime. Anyway, I see where you can improve upon. You really don't have an actual fighting style, you're using bits and pieces of what you see in battle. That may be good and all most of the time, but if you want to be a real powerhouse, using a fighting style. As far as your movements go, you're rather graceful in your movements. Naruto expertly broke down their fight while trying to think of a style of fighting that would fit for her. I've heard of a martial arts style from far out east called Aikido. It's as graceful and fluid as you can get in a fighting style from what I've heard. Sadly, I don't know anyone that trains in it, but the Konoha library does have books on it. Naruto offered. Kagaya thought for a moment, and nodded. It couldn't hurt to give it a try. Alright, I'll give this, Aikido, a try. Though as far as you go, your basic combat stance, and fighting style is just that. Too basic. I'm guessing the first style you chose you stuck with. She asked curiously. causing Naruto to hang his head in shame, as this was dead on the nail. Well, I know of a martial art called Jachirinkabart, or Muay Thai. It's a lot like your basic brawler fighting style, powerful, and fast, using all of your limbs as weapons, not just your fists and feet. Also, your jutsu arsenal is way too sparse. Who was your sensei? An idiot to not teach you anything else. Kagaya said in slight annoyance that no one taught her fiancé better than this. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the Leaf Village and near a hot springs, one closet pervert and self-proclaimed super pervert felt pangs of guilt after sneezing. Naruto seemed to sink even further into a depression the more she dismantled his way of fighting. He couldn't lie, she was right, but didn't mean it didn't hurt any less to hear it. Yeah, I've gotta thank them for leaving me so high and dry. Naruto trailed with an edge to his voice as he cracked his knuckles, he filling the valley they were in. Though I've never heard of that style, do you think there are some books on it? Naruto asked curiously. Kagaya smiled at this question, before summoning a comatose white Zetsu, causing Naruto to go on the defensive instantly. Before she flew through the hand seals required for the Edo Tensei, causing a coffin to rise from the ground with a language that Naruto couldn't read on the coffin lid. This is an old friend of mine who can actually teach you Muay Thai. Kagaya said simply as the white Zetsu disappeared into the coffin, and a moment later the lid of the coffin fell. Out stepped a tall, lanky, but a bit muscular man with short black hair which was in a messy hairstyle with a tan skin tone, with a confused look on his face with white bandages around his fists. Internet cookie for anyone who figured out who this was before I tell you who it is. Kagaya, why am I here? I thought I died in the battle against Hagoromo. How are you here as well? The man said in a language that Naruto couldn't make heads or tails of even if he was speaking at a slower pace than he currently was. Naruto's eyebrows furrowed, as the only time that he had seen a man like this was when he was in Kuma, where they had more dark-skinned people than he was used to. Who is this Kagaya? Naruto asked curiously, obviously out of the loop on who her old friend was. Kagaya turned to Naruto as she spoke. This, my darling, is Japanum Yiram, or Tony Jaa as he's better known, renowned martial artist in his homeland. I met him in my travels across the world to find a way to bring an end to the bloodshed in my era. Kagaya said a bit sadly, a frown coming across her face, but it disappeared as fast as it had come across her face as she turned to Tony to speak with him as well, using his native language. Tony, this is my fiancé, Naruto. He would like you to train him in the ways of Jachirinkabart. Would you mind training him for me? Kagaya asked with a soft smile, losing Naruto entirely as he didn't understand the language. Tony donned a contemplative look on his face for a few moments before nodding and looking at Naruto. We will start training tomorrow, got it? He said, confusing Naruto even further, because he knew that Tony was referring to him, but still didn't understand him. Naruto looked over to Kagaya for help, and for her to translate before he said anything that made him look like a blundering idiot. It seems he asked me a question, but what did he say? Naruto asked curiously as his gaze flickered back over to Tony for a moment. Kagaya sighed a bit. She was going to have to teach Naruto a dead language as well. This is going to be fun. Kagaya thought sarcastically to herself. He says you will begin your training tomorrow, and I hope you've been keeping your sleeping habit up. Because Tony liked to train at the ass-crack of dawn, or 4 a.m. in normal terms. Kagaya said simply, causing Naruto to face fault. Even during his shinobi training, the earliest he got up was 6 a.m. Tony turned back to Kagaya after inspecting Naruto for a few moments. He seems weak-willed. Do you think he can handle the toughness of Muay Thai training? Tony asked her. Naruto couldn't help but feel he had just been insulted by the slightly taller man. Alright, well, let's hope he can keep up with my ungodly Uzumaki stamina. Naruto exclaimed confidently before poking his chest with a balled fist with his thumb pointing towards his heart. Kagaya couldn't help but giggle at his sudden change from moody to exuberant in the span of less than a minute. Well, he's one of the people who helped me stop the warring era, so I'll let you be the judge of that. Kagaya said with a smile on her face at Naruto's second face fault. Naruto groaned. This was going to be just like the time when he went on the 3-year training trip with Jiraiya, training until he was sore and broken. It didn't help that his teacher was undead, and technically didn't have to rest at all. Alright, let's get back to home. Shikamaru and Sasuke are probably raising hell trying to figure out how a Hokage just disappears from their view. Naruto droned on. His clone had run out of chakra about an hour ago, and returned his memories to him, so he knew that Sasuke and Shikamaru knew about the switch now. Kagaya nodded and opened the portal. On the other side it showed the Hokage's office as they all stepped through the portal back into Naruto's dimension. Well, seems we will both have some explaining to do now, Kagaya said as the Anbu hopped down from the ceiling, the tips of their swords pointed at Kagaya's throat, ready to kill her, but then they saw Naruto. Tony raised an eyebrow to this sight after dropping into his Muay Thai stance, ready to take them on at a moment's notice for threatening his friend before he slowly relaxed as well. Naruto waved off his Anbu guard who disappeared back into the rafters after the all-clear was given by their leader. Shikamaru, Sasuke, you can come in now, I know you're skulking right outside my door. Naruto said with a bit of an annoyed sigh as he sat behind his desk and began on working on the paperwork his clone left behind, which thankfully wasn't much. The two in question stumbled through the door over each other as they blundered their way back into the room. The first to speak was Sasuke. What were you doing leaving the village Dobi? I couldn't even sense your chakra in Hai no Kuni, where the hell did you go that quickly? Also, who is he? Sasuke asked with his usual even and cool tone to his voice, pointing his thumb towards Tony who was standing there looking around at the room. Though as long as Naruto had known him, he could hear a bit of concern he doubted anyone else noticed. Shikamaru remained silent for the time being, but his question was the same as Sasuke's, but it was too much of a drag to ask him the same question for no reason. Naruto sighed in annoyance. He was hoping he could have put off explaining why he disappeared for now, so they wouldn't keep a closer eye on him. Though it did not seem to be in the cards for him. Well, for your first question, I went to one of Kagaya's dimensions to have some alone time with my fiancé, and spar, along with gaining a new sensei. Naruto said simply, his eyes flickering over to Tony as to show who his new sensei was. He will be teaching me Muay Thai. Any other questions? Naruto asked, steeping his hands together intertwined as he rested his chin on his interlaced fingers with a slightly bored look on his face. Shikamaru was the one to speak up this time. Muay what? What is that? Shikamaru asked curiously. He had read every book in the library, being especially bored with no missions, but even he didn't know what it was that Naruto was talking about. Sasuke nodded at this. The more questions Naruto answered, the more questions popped up in its place. Sasuke could already feel a headache coming on. Kagaya was the one to answer this question, as she was probably the only one left alive bar Tony on the account of being technically dead that knew of the style. It's a dead form of martial arts that is derived from a country that no longer exists. It was considered one of the deadliest styles in the world during my time. Kagaya explained, causing Sasuke to sigh, like he thought, these answers just brought more questions the more they answered their question. Sasuke's eyebrow twitched in annoyance. His best friend, and self-proclaimed rival, was always getting into the most odd of situations. Even as Hokage, this still didn't seem to change his charge head first into the situation attitude. You're still a Dobi, you know that right? Sasuke asked rhetorically, causing Naruto to gain a tick mark on his forehead at this comment. Naruto wanted to throw something at Sasuke for bringing back up his old nickname, but it brought back a feeling of nostalgia, so he decided against it. Yeah, and you're still a Tem, you know. Naruto replied with a grin on his face, causing Sasuke to gain a tick mark as well. Both of them tried to hold back their laughter, but failed, confusing literally everyone in the room, as they weren't in on the inside joke between the two friends. though Sasuke was the first to recover. Well, I'd say something like, "Don't leave without telling anyone where you're going again." But we all know you wouldn't listen anyway. Sasuke trailed a bit annoyedly. Naruto grew a smirk on his face at this comment. "You're damn right too. Don't go telling your leader what to do," Naruto exclaimed. He knew pulling the rank card was a bit of an move, but he finally beat Sasuke in something they both had been trying for. So sue him if he felt rubbing it in was a little bit deserved, all things considered. Sasuke decided to let him have this little victory over him, otherwise they might end up tearing up the countryside with their titan-like battles, and he didn't feel like making a bad impression after getting back to the village. "Alright, well, I'm going to go and handle some business. Send a toad for me should you need me to come back quickly," Sasuke said, opening a portal looked like a mix between Toba's spatial distortion jutsu and Keigaya's portal, showing the Uchiha hideout as his destination, probably to finish some unfinished business. Naruto's gaze flickered over to Shikamaru, non-verbally referring the question to him, and Shikamaru seemed to get the idea, shoving his hands into his pockets and leaving the room. "Alright, now that is settled, Keigaya," Naruto said, gaining her attention before speaking again. "Check out the library with Kuma-san, and look for any books on Aikido. If they have any questions, tell them it's a request from the Hokage," Naruto simply said, and the Anbu with the mask resembling a bear appeared in front of Naruto's desk, kneeling down before standing up and moving over to Keigaya, placing a hand on her shoulder, and shunching to the library. Naruto's eyes flickered over to Tony, who was looking around in amazement at where the Anbu had appeared out of seemingly thin air. Placing a hand on Tony's shoulder, he disappeared in a flash, reappearing in the Hokage's mansion guest room. "Stay here," Naruto simply said, hoping that the man would at least understand that much. It wouldn't do good for an Edo Tensei to be wandering around an unknown village. It could start all kinds of panic, and more paperwork. Tony just nodded, at least understanding that past their language barrier, as he lay down on the queen-sized futon laid out for guests. Still looking in amazement as Naruto disappeared from sight again, leaving he-man alone in the room in a foreign country. Meanwhile, back with Naruto, Naruto sighed as he sat behind his desk again, grabbing his pen and began signing off on more paperwork, though looking at his signature, he realized it was atrocious. He'd never really thought about it until now. Maybe I'll get Keigaya-chan to help me improve my handwriting as well, Naruto mused with a chuckle before he did his signature jutsu, and 10 clones popped into existence as he turned around in his chair, leaving the clones to their jobs. Fiddling with a long lock of his hair. "Maybe I should let my hair grow out. I'll look even more like dad, heh. Naruto thought to himself as he stared out the window overlooking the village in all of its glory. It had been destroyed 2 times, but it bounced back better than ever.